She's bringing it all.
You. Okay. Should we wait for you? This is it. This is all. I guess this is it. All right. Okay, so we are recording for some individuals who said that they couldn't make it but want to hear. So you don't have to address the camera, but you need to be able to speak into the mic. It's not going through the mains, so if we need to turn it up, we can. But it's just going through the live stream.
It's just going through the camera, not recorded.
It's just going through the camera. I should actually speak through the mic, eh? Yeah, not through the live stream. Sorry, just recording. So I think both of you may have met Dwayne before. He was at the Soul Care Conference, which is how there was, yeah. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Now you look. I knew you looked familiar.
Yeah. So we went for lunch with Dwayne and myself, Rochelle, and Nigel, and it was like, oh man, this guy's got a really amazing story. So in the whole vein of the Healthy Disciples series that we're doing, it was like this would be a great fit. So I'm excited that you're coming and speaking in our church tomorrow. But even at supper today, we were talking about how even their church, Dwayne said, the congregation is not reflective of the community. And I look at our church and I would say it's very similar. You know, there's other than Dylan in the last bit, I can't remember really much for natives that have been in our church. So maybe you guys can speak into that, but I think that it's pretty clear that we're not reflective of our community. So this is kind of an opportunity to ask those questions. There's no questions, I don't think, that are stupid. No questions that are, I hope we won't offend you if there's anything. And if we do, I trust that you'll work with us through that. So why don't we open up in prayer, and then we'll go from there. Lord, I thank you for Dwayne and Lovejoy and for their kids coming here this weekend. And I know that you have something in this for us, that you want to shape us and move in our spirits. And so, Lord, I just pray that we would approach this time together and on this weekend with humility, to hear what your Spirit wants to say to us, and to show us how to minister better to the First Nations community. Lord, would you empower us to reach those people, to set the captives free, and to shine your light into that community. So Lord, would you give Dwayne and Lovejoy as well just the freedom to challenge us, and would they step into that position boldly? In your name, amen. So I have a few questions, but I hope that you guys have questions. And at any point, if we want to kind of key off of what's being talked about, let's make this a discussion as much as possible, because that's what it's meant to be. So tell us who you are, what you do, all that stuff.
I just want to acknowledge your humility in coming here and being here and wanting to learn, and we really appreciate that. So thank you.
Yeah, I think I just agree with Lovejoy. I think it's really cool. I mean, I've never done anything like this. You know, it's kind of pointing out the obvious, right? The elephant in the room, you know. Yeah, and I mean, we live in a country where, you know, there is Aboriginal people, and and then I guess, how do we work together, right? And there is no dumb question. You know, I like the hard questions, so if you could just be honest and straightforward, that'd be cool. So But yeah. Yeah, my name is Dwayne. That's Lovejoy. We have 8 children, and yeah, I don't even know all their names. I'm not even gonna try. But yeah, and I do construction work in a town called Roblin, Manitoba, and yeah, it's about 1,500 people. Yeah, it's a mix of native and non-native. So, but yeah, and yeah, my wife homeschools all our 8 kids, and that's about it for that. Anything you want to say about that?
That's about all.
Where did you grow up, and what did I mean, I don't want to go into too much about for tomorrow, but tell us like where you grew up and all that stuff.
I grew up just east of Roblin, on a farm. I was homeschooled. Big family. Anything I'm missing?
Aboriginal.
Oh, my dad is Métis, and my mom is English and Swedish. And yeah, then yeah.
Yeah, and I grew up in a northern community called Camperville, Manitoba, and I'm Métis. And yeah, Camperville was beside 2 reserves, Pine Creek and Duck Bay. And yeah, I grew up typical reserve kid, I think. And yeah.
Okay. And when you say typical reserve kid, what?
Yeah, I mean, typical reserve kid. I think when you think of someone living on the reserve, all the stereotypes. Yeah, it was a welfare community. There was a lot of drinking, a lot of drugs, and poverty. There was a lot of fatherlessness. A lot of kids alone in their houses with no parents. I mean, everything you could kind of think of what a reserve was, it's true. And yeah, I mean, I grew up in that type of atmosphere, so not a Christian home, not there was a Catholic church and a residential school in Camperville, and I never went there, but I definitely feel the effects of it on our community. But yeah.
Okay, thank you. So again, if you guys have any questions, just jump in. But I'm curious, what was your experience of Christianity, of the church in your childhood?
Yeah, I mean the my experience with Christianity, like I remember going to the Catholic Church. I was an altar boy, and it was just something we did, and I remember the statue of Mary would come around into people's houses, and we'd kneel for hours, right? And I just thought it was the most boring thing in the world, right? And I know the rosaries. I could still recite the rosaries, and yeah, and that was kind of, I knew there was a God. I remember seeing the statue of Jesus and wondering, what in the world am I looking at? And I don't remember anything the priest said. And yeah, I mean, it's just yeah, that was just, you just went to church, and it was just what we did. And then there was a Christian church in our community, a born again believing church, and they preached Jesus and preached hope, and again, yeah, just going to tent meetings and stuff like that type of thing. A lot of old people singing hymns, and still being very bored out of my mind, but wishing it would end at 1:00 at night, right? But
did that mix with like, you know, the religion of like your, like the reserve, how like you had the creator, and how did that mix with like going to church? And
I honestly, if I think back on my life, I don't ever remember going to like a drum ceremony. I don't ever remember it being a thing back at home when I was growing up. Like this idea of, no, the church is bad and we believe in the creator. I don't think I ever heard any of those conversations. And it was like the church, like our grannies were Catholic, right? And they taught their kids Catholic, and we learned the Catholic ways. And, you know, I think this idea of like the creator and all that is just actually coming to now. Like, I don't think our reserve or the reserves close by, I think the idea that it was evil was still like present, you know, in our community. And but yeah, does that answer the question? You want to say anything about that?
Yeah, just probably with the residential school being there, all the kids were taught Catholic. And so all the older generation, that's what they believed or were, yeah, that's what they knew. That's what they grew up learning is, well, I don't know, but that's my guess on what it would be.
Yeah, it never felt like church was wrong. Like, it never felt like, oh, going to church is wrong, going to the tent meeting is wrong. Like now it kind of feels like it is a bit wrong, you know, just because everything the media pushes and stuff, yeah, there is a divide now, you know, and yeah, that's why we're talking now, right? But yeah.
I think because there's so much brokenness, people are looking for a source for hope. And so, but they know that there's been a lot taken away from them. So they're trying to find a way back out of this brokenness. So that's why this, like the cultural thing is like really heavily, it's, and in a lot of ways it can be a positive thing for people to try to start finding out who they are again and where they stand and what like, because a lot of stuff was just hidden, and like, yeah, like they wouldn't be talked about with kids or whatever in families, and so because it was all like taboo or whatever, so people are just looking for hope and trying to find out who they are again, I think, for the most part.
You got something? You guys can stay off the stage. So what was your experience of Christians outside of the reserve for yourself during your childhood? Like, was there any?
Yeah, like for me, yeah, in the tent meetings, yeah, I had an uncle, his name was Jack, and he would take me out to all these tent meetings. Yeah, and I mean, yeah, like again, you know, I don't know if you've ever been to a native tent meeting, but yeah, it's a lot of just, it's, you know, singing hymns and older people, and yeah, I mean the white. I don't know if I ever looked at anyone back then as brown or white, but and again, there, I just remember just thinking, God, this is just normal, right? I'm a kid and I'm in this tent meeting because my grandma's here and my uncle's here, and just, you know, hearing God, hearing Jesus. But I never felt in my family and in my relatives that there was anything different about these other people, right? Or, you know, so.
Okay, cool. Anyone want to say anything? Yeah. Okay. Oh. He's got good questions.
Oh, no. Well, I did spend some, I just mentioned to you that I did spend over a period of 4 years. I spent time on 4 different reserves as trying to help out with a moose management restoration program. And one thing I knew ahead of time even that they had a strong spiritual side because it was the Wildlife Federation. And I've been I was on the provincial game advisory and I was trying to, and I met with some of the people at conventions and stuff, trying to convince them that they should harvest the bears because the bears go after the moose cows and that they would have more meat. And moose is a very important animal to the reserve people. And of course then I realized there was a spiritual connection. The bear comes across to them as a symbol of strength, and something like the raven becomes. The one thing that I think I learned a lot about is the spiritual side of the people. That's one thing that I thought that maybe all of us included, and mainly you wanted to use the white side of community and the politicians and leaders in general, I don't think understand even a little bit about the spiritual side of the First Nations people. And because one thing that I impressed with immediately, it didn't matter whether we were meeting in Prince Albert or Nipawin or on any one of the 4 reserves. We started in prayer. And in some of the reserves, they were like pray to Mother Earth. But some of them were in Cree, but some of them on the Red Earth Indian Reserve, for instance, you'd honestly think they were Pentecostal ministers. So there was a spiritual, but the spiritual side of there always came out. And no matter, even if we had hostility during the meeting, which we sometimes did, we always ended in prayer. And I thought that's something that our side of the society certainly could learn from, because we left there handshakes and a good feeling for each other. And so it was really quite an eye-opener. But the one thing that I wondered whether, is that part of the problem, is that our side of the society does not even get near to thinking about the spiritual side of these people. I was wondering what you would think about that.
Yeah, so that's a pretty long question, but and yeah, I mean, I think, I'm just going to talk from my own experience. Like Native people and Aboriginal people are different people. They're culturally different. They are spiritual people, right? I mean, they're devoted people. Like we were just talking today about, the older generation, even though the truth about the residentials came out, they would still say that they're Catholic people, right? So they know about devotion, they know about prayer, and they know the truth. That's why a lot of them didn't leave the Catholic system. But I think, it's a tough question to answer because even in your question, you had a hard time saying, us white people. It's harder for you to address. Or for me, it's like, yeah, I'm Native, and I know I'm different. I accept who I am, and and is it spiritual? Yeah, there's a spiritual side to us. You know, we understand darkness, you know, because we've lived in darkness, so we could understand light better probably because we know what darkness feels like. But I don't know if that answers you correct. There, we are different culturally, but
They sometimes used it as, but as far as I was concerned, it was never, it was not a difference. I actually ended up making really good friends with quite a few of them and had a great deal of respect for them. But there was one thing that comes out of me very quickly is the reserve system is absolutely flawed from one end to the other. It's, I don't know, it should have ended 50 years ago or more, or never started, but how to get people to understand. And I think the one thing that's the real problem now, and I don't know whether you'd agree, is that if you go back, it seems like the one thing that I think personally was missing right from 50 years ago from our side of it, or the Canada side of it, and maybe today from the Aboriginal side of it, is truth. I think the media, for instance, it's so one-sided now, and the same as it was 25, 30 years the other way. And they're just, the one big thing I think that's missing is truth. Because I just can't believe that, as an example, just recently, the lady that was the chief of the Canadian First Nations peoples, she wanted to start an accountability thing amongst the reserves and a transparency. She got fired. Well, that doesn't play itself very well for people that are listening in. She obviously wanted to clean up a lot of stuff, but she got fired for it. And now you're not really, the media too is one-sided now. To say there was no good came out of the residential schools. I met all kinds of people on those reserves that were pretty well educated. But you don't hear that. You're not allowed to say it even now. So I think that's one of the things that in fact fosters racism. I don't know whether that's a fair question to you, but would you agree with that or not? Or what am I missing here?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's another tough statement or question / venting / you know, and you know, as a Canadian, you know, you're born, right, and there's a native issue, right? Unfortunately, yeah, you were told, right? And as a native, I'm told the whites don't like me. And as a white person, you're told natives don't like you. This is the country we live in, right? And you know, you kind of hit a point there where, you know, like reserves are bad, you know, that they wanted to fire the chief. I mean, the residential school, this is my opinion. And from my experience, I grew up in a community that had a residential school. And I mean, where was my dad? Where was his dad? You know, why were we all broken? Why was everyone drunk on welfare day? Those are the questions I have. And the only answer I could come up with is it was by design. It was by design, right? The government designed it that way. You know, when you go onto the reserve and you see all the houses 5 miles away from one another, that was by design. That was by someone designing a community. You know, how do you want closeness in a community? Community comes together, But the government said, no, we're actually going to put these people 5 to 10 miles away from each other, so they can't come together and rise up against us, right? And the residential school, like they didn't have a choice, in going there. They were forced, and some people will debate that, right? They had a choice. Well, if they had a choice, why is everyone alcoholic? Anyone that has addiction issues, it's not really the alcohol that's the problem. They're trying to numb a pain, right? They're trying to numb a hurt. Now you look at a native population as a whole, like there's a lot of numbing of the pain, right? There's a lot of hurt like that. That was by design, right? Giving you a card and giving you a number, saying you're number 5,167, right? And if you get sick and go to the hospital, you better make sure you have that number, right? Because back then they would deny, like if a mother was pregnant and she went into the hospital and didn't have her treaty number, they wouldn't deliver the baby, right? Because she was off reserve, right? And yeah, and it was by design, right? It like a reserve, you look at the communities, why aren't the houses closer together? Why aren't there any street numbers, street addresses or numbers on, those are questions I think you got to ask yourself, like, why is it like that? When you go onto reserve, oh, come and visit your friend. What house number? No, you just go down to the Four Corners and you take a left at the spruce tree and down the valley. You cross the river and there's a train track over here, and that's where I live. And I think Native people are finally asking those questions, right? They're saying, okay, what happened? And like you said, the truth, right? Let's find out the truth, right? And any other questions?
So there's obviously broken pieces, right? Like you said, there's a misunderstanding between the whites and the First Nations. Now I hear you use Native. I heard Luke use Native. I tend to think I should use First Nations, but does it not matter? Are they all equal? Or if a white guy uses Native, is that a bad thing? I'm asked, and then I have some other questions.
Yeah, to me, I would say you as a white person shouldn't say Native, but I'm not going to tell you what to say, because this is what I think. I think truth and reconciliation needs to go both ways, and that means even on my part, right? Even on my part, I gotta, instead of being like, oh, you can't say that word, I'll be like, yeah, that's the way you understand it. So that's the way I'm gonna communicate with you, right? I don't even know your name. I'm just gonna say white guy, and you could call me Native guy, but eventually maybe we'll come to the point where I'm saying your name and you're saying my name, right? And yeah, like I think the truth and reconciliation thing needs to go both ways. And for me, it's okay to say, just for simplicity reasons and for the older generation to say Native, but the bigger population, they frown upon that, and they rather it be like Aboriginal or First Nation, or, for me, I'm Métis, right? That's my lineage, right? So it's different than First Nation. It's different than Inuit people, right? And so, and then you could even go deeper. There's Cree people, there's Ojibwe people, there's all, hundreds of different languages in Canada. There's not just French, and English. There's Cree, there's Soto, there's Gwich'in, there's Inuit, there's, you know, all different types of languages. But we're told to believe that we're a bilingual country, we're French and English, right? But that, again, isn't really the truth. But yeah.
You can let me go again, are you? Well, you touched on the other part, is the truth and reconciliation part, that we're all hearing about truth and reconciliation. We have a committee in town that's the Truth and Reconciliation Committee. I went to a blanket exercise that they put on for community people to come and learn from, right? And there was really good education in that. But how do we build bridges? And as Christians, what should we be looking at? What should the board be sitting around the table talking about in terms of bridging relationships with First Nations people in our community and in the reserves around us?
The question is, how do we build bridges?
Yeah. Like I ask you about the titles, because I think respect is an important part, right? So using the right titles when we're talking to each other is important, but just for respect. But how do we respect the people? And when we do have relationships, there's a Truth and Reconciliation Day coming up. Should we have a participation in it? When we have a friend who lives on the reserve, should we be going to visit them? How do we reach out? Or do we just count on what we've had for years as when we cross paths in the community, kind of thing?
Should we give you a second to think while we get snacks?
Yeah, go for it.
I'm the only one, apparently.
You got that question?
The end of it.
Yeah, just how do we build bridges?
Get anything?
I'll get some pie there.
Yeah. Okay.
You want a piece of this? Sure. Yeah, that might help.
What's your name?
Randy.
Randy.
What's your name?
Dwayne.
Dwayne. These two are brothers.
Oh, are they? Their brother is Dan.
I'm just warning you.
So their brother Dan is the one who's the
Interact.
Yeah, for Interact. Encounter.
What should we pass you? Do you want me to get you another plate?
No, thanks.
No?
I guess you get to have the pie plate.
Yeah, you get the whole
Oh, sorry.
You're pregnant. Still got room in the bed. Don't turn that around on me.
Speaking of bands.
Is that a new vehicle I saw in your driveway?
It is. The dog minivan.
Yeah.
Cool.
So you went from Toyota to Honda, is that
Yes.
correct?
Does it have the back doors?
Two side doors, yep. And then the back goes up with wave your foot underneath. Space age. So you get to field that one.
Yeah, I'm just. Yeah. You want me to answer it now? Yeah, just gotta think now. So yeah, it was like, what do we do? How do we build bridges? Is that was with the truth that we're coming up on the Truth and Reconciliation Day? What do we do? Should we do anything? Should we just stick to what we know? Yeah, I mean, I think this is just, yeah. I mean, I think you're doing it right now. That's what I would say to that question is like, what do we do? You're having this Aboriginal guy come in here. You're talking about truth and reconciliation. You're having me share my story in your church on a Sunday morning to the congregation. You're not really sure what I'm going to say. You're sweating a little bit. Don't know, I hope we're not going to lose half the people, But, yeah, I think, as much as you as a Caucasian person feels this hostility right now, like it's the same feeling I think we have now as well, right? I mean, like I said, growing up, I never felt like there was a difference, but now I feel it, right? And what do we do now, with that feeling? And I think the elephant had to, be addressed in our country, and it is now. And now it's like, what do we do? It's like, to me, this is, I think, like the truth and reconciliation thing is like, it's like having a closet full of stuff that you should have dealt with like 50 years ago, and you just keep throwing stuff in there. And then it's like that you have to deal with it at some point, right? And then someone else opens the door on you. Your wife opens the door, and all your junk falls out on the floor. Now you have to do something. And I think even just saying like, should we just do nothing? I think that is not gonna happen anymore, right? I mean, what do you do? I got to be careful what I say, just because I might have backlash against me from. But what do you do when the government gives, this First Nation hectares of land? What do you do when the Aboriginal people deny your moose rights or whatever, right? What do you do? And yeah, I think it's the closet's open, the stuff's out there for the world to see. And as I've been sharing in different churches, when I get the opportunity to share on a First Nation reserve, which isn't very often, I usually say to my First Nation brothers and sisters, we've been reconciled with the government, we've been reconciled with the church. Now's the time to be reconciled with one another. It's us. We did damage to each other as well, right? We abused each other. It's our dirty laundry hanging out for the world to see. We need to do it for ourselves too. So, yeah, I think that answers the question. You want to say anything about that?
I just want to point out that every Native person has their own unique experience and own unique view on the whole situation. And yeah, like what you're doing right now is very important in that way, and just talking to those people and learning from them is, I think, the best way to build bridges. Is like any relationship that's been broken, you have to actually meet up and talk and maybe fight a little and forgive, and it's a process. It's not, let's build this bridge real quick. So yeah.
So we can get back to our comfortable lives.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then maybe this is kind of backtracking a bit, but like I was saying before, how like reserves, it was by design that, you know, the reserves were kind of set up the way it was. And it's also by design, in my opinion, that you as a Caucasian man, like the country was set up more for you to succeed, right? You know, like sure, the residential schools, they had all the education to be everything that you had. But when they went to go for the job, they got denied. You know, why is that? You know, why is that? Because the country was designed to benefit you as a Caucasian person, right? And if you want the truth, you know, the truth, it's hard pill to swallow, but you know, and you could disagree, you know, you don't, you know, that's part of the reconciliation thing too, right? Don't think that what I'm saying is the absolute truth. Like challenge what I'm saying, you know, tell me I'm wrong. But here you go.
Okay. Anyone want to?
Well, I just have something separate that I was going to ask before, but you kind of mentioned like that some of the people are wanting to like asking those questions now, right? Like why is it designed like this and stuff? What's the like general consensus, would you say? Like, I mean, and you said different people have different experiences. What's the like, do people want to reconcile? Like, do they like what would be the general attitude that like on reserves, are they wanting to get out of where they're at, or are they, I don't know. Does that make sense, that question?
Sort of. I mean, what are you trying to say? Like, just say it plainly. Just like
are they wanting to reconcile with white people in general, or do they still like, or are they thinking that we, I don't know. I don't even know how to phrase what I'm asking, but like,
are they thinking you need to pay for our hurt?
yeah, like how are they even feeling about the whole obviously, like on the media it's everywhere, like with the residential schools, like what's the general thought? I don't, maybe there is no general thought, maybe it's,
Yeah, I think I understand what you those are tough questions. I should have stayed in school. No. Yeah, I think like this is again maybe more my opinion, but and maybe some of my experience, but like I think the voice of Aboriginal people, they never had a voice, you know, for 80 years, right? There's nothing in history about Aboriginal people other than residential schools, right? They came to Canada, you know, there was this trading thing, there was living together, and then residential schools, 80 years, now they have a voice again, right? And I think just from my experience talking to different church people and different other people, it does feel like, you know, there's kind of an attack maybe on you, or you know, or just like, what do we do, right? I mean, and I think they have a voice now, and they're learning, you know, even myself, I'm learning how to use that voice, right? I'm learning, you know, like I've requested to speak in many different white churches. Not all of them have invited me. You know, there's been a few that actually discouraged what I'm doing, saying it was wrong, I'm only causing more division, you know, and my heart is that you wouldn't feel, as a Christian person especially, you wouldn't feel like you can't tell that Native guy that God loves you because of what happened in residential school, right? And that's my hope, and is, you know, just coming and sharing my story, is that, you know, it needs to continue, right? Your Christian faith, your reaching out needs to continue. I mean, do all Native people feel like, what's the general consensus? I mean, I think everyone has their own opinion, right? Their right to voice their opinion. A lot of people are hurt, and that's what you see in the media when you see, the Native person yelling or fighting a church person. You see hurt. It's hurt from both ways, and the voice I think that's coming across is like, we're hurting. We've been hurting for 80 years, right? And we want you to hear our hurt, and we also want you to feel our hurt, and but it's not all that, right? I mean, like for me, just coming here, being vulnerable, and sharing, I don't want you to feel hurt. I don't want you to feel, that we don't like you anymore. But I don't know. Does that answer your question? Sort of.
I think maybe I'll like formulate. I'll maybe like think of how to like formulate that a little bit more. So I feel like I know what I'm trying to say in my head, but I can't put it in words.
No, I thought you were going a different way, but in terms of like your opinion of the reserve system, what is your opinion? If you haven't shared it already, I've popped.
My opinion of the reserve system.
Yeah, and I mean, I want to say like, what do we do differently? What does the government do differently? But that's such a huge question and answer. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it was kind of by design that they set it up as a reserve. Like, I don't know the exact history, but it was more like, let's gather, because they were, this is the thing, like you're going back centuries, right? And you're trying to answer that question, now, what do we think of the reserve system? Well, it was, they gathered the people up and put them in one area and said, you're not moving anymore. And here's your number. Here's your number. If you leave here, you're going to lose that number, and you're not going to be anything. You're not going to be Canadian, because they weren't allowed to be Canadian. They weren't allowed, they weren't allowed to vote. They weren't allowed to do many things. If you think about COVID, right? When COVID happened, it's a similar situation with Native people. They weren't allowed to gather in groups of 3. They had a card that they had to, when they went to a store or a hospital, they had to show their card, right? And it's very similar to the COVID, right? And they weren't allowed to gather in groups of 3, yeah. And they would send it wasn't an RCMP, they called it I forget, an Indian agent. So every reserve had an Indian agent, and when you wanted to leave the reserve, you had to show them your card, tell them where you're going, sign out, like, you had to actually sign out of the reserve. And then if you were gone for 3 days and didn't come back, you lost your Indian status, which meant that you lost your welfare check. If you got sick and went to the hospital, you weren't a Canadian, and you weren't an Indian, you were basically nothing, and then it was harder for First Nation women, because like they're gonna have a baby, and they had to leave for more than 3 days. They would lose their status, right? And then that's where Bill C-31, if you hear that term, they basically gave all these women back the right to be First Nations. So
anyone who had lost their status through ways like, and the women who married white people too. They lost their status. The men could marry white women, but the women couldn't marry white men and keep their status for lots of years.
Yeah, how would you feel if, you just wanted to leave Tisdale for 3 days and you had to sign out and you had to make sure you had your card with you. That when I say it was by design, it was by design, So now you leave the reserve, you're going to the city to find food, to find work. You lose your status. What are you? What are you, Native? Are you Canadian? Are you nothing? Do you have a voice? Now you do that with 100 people. You do that with 1,000 people. You do that with 100,000 people, right? And yeah, that's a tough question.
There was a lot in your answer I didn't know. I'm embarrassed to say that. Maybe it's like I grew up in BC, so I don't think they have reserves. No, sorry, they didn't do treaties. Yes, we definitely had reserves. But from what I saw in the Lower Mainland, reserves were very different. Like it was like the reserve was in our town, or in our city.
But still treaty.
I don't think BC had treaties.
No. Yeah,
I could be wrong. I will admit I don't know. So, anyways, that's yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Oh, I guess I should.
Too late.
There's a lot we don't know, right? Is what you're saying. We're all learning this right now. Even me, like learning about the not gathering in groups of 3 and having a card to leave your town, and like I just learned that just because now, like I said, Native people have a voice and the truth is coming out. And that's when they say we want truth and reconciliation. They just want people to know the truth. That there's a reason why we're all messed up. And but yeah.
I saw you lunch, so.
Well, I think the design was against us also, like not by the Native people, but by our government. I really feel that strongly. I feel like we were taught wrong on purpose, so that we would neglect and we would ignore and we would continue the pattern. I think they mistreated us also in that way. That doesn't excuse us. And, I think back in my life, like I had racist, great uncle that was like, and I remember being embarrassed sitting in a restaurant and he needed to say something rude because there was a First Nations person in the restaurant. And so that was there. But my parents taught us that people were people, and so I learned to make friends. And I think that's the big piece, is to listen and ask questions and get to know them just like I would anybody else that came. I don't know if that's right or not, but I found that to work. Like I tutored a First Nations lady that was older than me, at Cumberland, and we got to be really good friends. And I really love her, and I feel like she must accept me to a certain extent because she'll yell my name across the street when she comes to Tisdale. So, but I feel like because she lives on the reserve, it's hard for me to access her, because she said, like, don't drive out by yourself to see me, and always phone before you come. So anyways, there's all those different pieces, but I had a lot of fun with her anyways, and anybody I've ever met and talked to, I've enjoyed a lot. That's First Nations. Do I have a question? I guess. I think we keep not just First Nations people out of our church, but we keep people that are poorer or that don't quite fit our white upper class with a job and all those different pieces. My son-in-law would not feel like he fit in here either. So, but yeah, he's white, but he has long hair and he is rougher. But I know that he doesn't feel like he fits either, and I don't know how to make it fit for him either, honestly. But I don't know. So that doesn't really ask a question, but I'm not really except for, I guess, just keep befriending people, but I don't know. I don't know how we bridge that gap, actually. I don't know if that's a question or not. That's not very good.
Yeah, so here's I got a question for you. Like, what do you think, like with your nephew there, like what do you think it'll take for him? Like, what's stopping him from coming to the church? Like, like you said, we're upper class, working class people. You know, what do you think is the hindrance?
Well, I know what he says is that he feels judged. And I think that that's probably sort of correct. If I think through even my own reactions about things, like, do we really, like we kind of want people to be the same as us, right? And he makes friends with those guys that are in town that they're not going to come here either. And some of them are First Nations and some are not. And some are Métis and some aren't. But I keep praying for them, and we built a shop in our yard so they can work in the shop, but I don't know. I think it might take my lifetime. I'm not really sure. I don't know. It makes me sad, but like my daughter, like he's married to my daughter, so she brings the kids and comes, but I don't know. I don't know when he will feel welcome or that he's safe enough to come.
Yeah, so he feels unwell, doesn't fit in, judged, right? Yeah, I know what those feelings feel like. But yeah.
I would say though that even people who are upper class, middle class, working class would also, right? I don't know if it's particularly type of person. It's like, yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't say that it's necessarily class. I would say maybe, but I also feel like, I don't know. I struggle with that one too because I feel like we're friendly here, and like would go out of my way to welcome someone and stuff, but probably further than that, relating to them and being like someone who has something in common or whatever with them. I don't know. I have to think more on that one too.
So for you, I appreciate you being vulnerable to share your life with us in words. When you obviously transitioned at some point to attending church outside of the reserve, what was that like for you? How did you deal with that? How did you break that uncomfortable barrier, or does that still exist for you?
That's a good question. Oh, that's a tough question. Stop the camera. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I think like, and just a short answer to that, because I mean, now I might as well share my whole testimony, but like growing up on a reserve in a Métis community, we were very poor. We didn't have a vehicle. Like we walked everywhere, and that was me for 18 years, right? I maybe went into town maybe 20 times in 18 years, left the reserve, right? That's how poor we were. And And I always thought everyone was the same, right? I grew up, you know, I knew I was Métis and Pine Creek was First Nation, but my auntie lived there. We lived together, right? There was no differences. And when I moved to Roblin, I mean, it was the first time I think I ever experienced racism. I was walking on the street and this guy was looking at me and I could just see hatred in his eyes towards me. And I was like, what is this? What is this feeling? Right? I mean, what's happening? Right? Did I do something wrong? Or, and I gave my life to God. I ended up in church and, it's just the way people were taught, I think, right? Without me talking about people's racism, I don't, I did transition, but I think, it's still a process, right? I mean, we're one of the only visible representatives in our community, in our church, right? And our church is a bigger church in Roblin, and I know what the First Nations people in Roblin are thinking. They're thinking if I go there, I'm going to be judged. Nobody likes me. I remember going to church service after church service and leaving there, and not one person talked to me. Not one person said hi. Is that because, and for me as an Aboriginal person, I have to go there. I have to be like, is it because I'm Aboriginal? I don't know. No one ever came up to me and said, hey, I'm not going to talk to you because you're different. Right? They'd be like, oh, hi, how's it going? But what's happening inside them, right? Are they just having pity on me? Do they really care? Fortunately for me, I think my church really cared for me and loved me well, and it was that's what kept me going back, is that I would go and they'd be like, hey, Dwayne, here's a bag of donuts. Hey, Dwayne, here's some clothes. I didn't have any clothes. They're like, we just want to give you some clothes. And they're like, hey, Dwayne, here's a mailbox, a church mailbox. And I was like, wow, and I hadn't even been going there for very long. And they're like, we want to put you in the photo. Do you have a phone number? I'm like, nope. What's that payphone number? But they just accepted me and loved me, and never once did anyone say, we have to love you because you're Aboriginal. They loved me because I was broken and I needed to be loved, and fortunately they were all in a place where they were doing that already, and now it's harder because when that Native person comes into your church, you got to be like, hey, we have to reach out to that person now. We got to do something, right? And I think, love is the important piece there, right? Instead of thinking I got to reach out because they're different, I got to reach out, to, do you love that person, right? And people know, people know if you love them or not, if you're fake or real, right? And I don't know if that answers your question or not, but I think my church they loved me well, and they like, just a short story. There was a missions trip to Mexico, and I wanted to go on this missions trip, and I had a criminal record, and I didn't have any money. I was making $7 an hour throwing garbage for 4 hours a day. And I said to the church leader, I was like, I want to go on this missions trip to Mexico. And they knew I had a criminal record because I broke into the liquor store. So, so they knew I was a criminal, right? And they're like, yeah, well, you could sign up, but they're not going to let you across the border, right? And and they said, you're not even going to get a passport because you have a criminal record. And I applied anyway, and I got a passport somehow. And the youth leader was like, is this fake? Did he forge this? Right? And they were still like, they're like, all right, your name's still on the list to go to Mexico. And then the local taxi company, they came to the church, and they're like, we want to help Dwayne go to Mexico. And they gave me $500 American, right? Because Mexico only accepts American money. And that was I was 22 years old, and that was the first time I held $500. And I was just like, wow, people actually love me, and they were still letting me, go on this missions trip to Mexico. And I still needed like a couple $1,000, and the church eldership paid for my ticket. They're like, we're going to pay the $2,500 for Dwayne to go. And yeah, and I was on this bus, and the only native guy going to Mexico with all these young white youth people, right? And, they were all worried when we got to the border. They were like, I could hear them making plans. Okay, when we get there, we got to get a bus ticket for Dwayne, because they're going to, you're going to pull his record up, and we got to, they're still looking at my passport, wondering if it's forged, right? But they let me through, right? And I think people were like, even church people, they were like, wow, God is real. God made a way for this native guy to get across the border, And, as much as the church has helped me, I think in turn I've also helped the church just do truth and reconciliation before those words were ever politicized. That was happening, and yeah, that's my story.
I think that one of the questions I've had going into this is, like, for those of you that know Dylan, is how do we love him well? And I thought that really helped me. So that was very much appreciated. Yeah. Anything? Any other questions or thoughts? No?
What connections you would have with the Northern Canada Evangelical Mission? I don't know whether I said that twice, didn't I?
You said it perfectly.
But I guess one reason why I guess about 45 years ago I signed up to be a Minuteman on their program, and they send out 3 times a year, and you I really felt good about being involved in that. I was just wondering whether that's something that we should be promoting more. They're right across the country. I realize they maybe are not as much in the southern part of Canada as they are in the northern part, but I believe they're right across the country and even in the territories. And it just seems like I enjoy watching their program on the television, and really thinking that would be something that we should be promoting. I never talk about it to anybody, and maybe we should be. I wonder how you feel about that.
Yeah, like you're talking about Tribal Trails TV and all the missionaries and all that. Yeah, I mean, yeah, they have a plane, and yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll answer your question with a question, like, why aren't you doing that? Why aren't you? What has stopped you from going to the board and being like, hey, we got this native missionary, let's support him because he's in our own country, instead of supporting, some guy that's a missionary in China that we never will ever see any fruit. Let's support this native missionary. Let's support this person over here that's doing work in Northwest Territories. Let's you know.
I actually invited him in here to speak to our youth at Christmas time, and the people asked for, and he told me they had nothing for Christmas, the family, and I think he was in God's Lake, one other place. But the people responded real well, and gave him and I had him in our home. And but he was with the Northern Canada Evangelical Mission, and I just wonder if it's something that we should maybe be inviting some of the more of those type of people in here to speak to us.
Absolutely. I think, I'm not a missionary with them. I'm just a carpenter with 8 children. And, but, yeah, I mean, I think, and this is just maybe a rant, but, as I looked into different churches, like I sent a letter out saying I want to come and speak in your church. Like the bigger cities, they'll actually have like a Filipino outreach pastor, or and in all those churches you'll never see a native outreach pastor, an Aboriginal outreach, even though like somewhere like Winnipeg or Regina, they'll have huge. Why isn't those bigger churches saying, hey, let's get someone that's like Dwayne and make him a pastor, make him a missionary? You want to change your community, you support someone like me, how could we? And that's what I asked our church. Like I actually went to a board meeting and I said, I don't want to just sit here for another 20 years. I want to see my people set free. Are you going to support me? And they did. They've supported us financially, and they let me go up on stage, and they just say, we don't agree with everything Dwayne says, but we're going to give him a voice. And, and it's just a continuation of them loving me, and, but I think, yeah, you bring in the native missionaries, you cancel all the Chinese missionaries and you bring all the native missionaries in and you start supporting them, right? And that's how you change your country. And, I think all places need hope, but, this is your home. So you want to say anything to that?
Not really. I have a question for you guys. What is it in you that has made you want to do this and to learn how to support and your native neighbors?
I can answer for myself. Honestly, the little bit of interactions I've had with Dylan and the First Nations band south of Tisdale, Kinniston, who they interact a little bit with the Bible camp, which is like right on the edge of the reserve, and even in the youth group, we've had a few First Nations individuals that have come through, and I see the brokenness, and it breaks my heart. And I see my daughter is in grade 1 with Dylan's daughter, and already there's a disparity of like ability to read and health, and it breaks my heart that they're like you said, that they're not set free. That troubles me, and the reality too that I have no idea how to interact with them to the point where I think Jonathan, what word do we use, what title, First Nations, Aboriginal. I have no idea, and that stops me from engaging them because I don't know what to say. Sure.
I call you. Yeah, that could be a first thing you could say to break the ice. What do I call you? I see you're Indigenous Canadian.
Maybe don't go up to just a stranger and say that. You know, maybe ask their name first, right?
I'll say, I really didn't need the mic for this. I'll say Dwayne told me not to give money to China, so I'm giving it to you.
I would totally agree with the fact that I am just at a loss for even knowing where to start. And I want to. I want to love them and show them, but I feel like there's such a culture disconnect, such a a divide, and I don't know where to go from there. So that would be my.
I have some First Nations friends, and when I brought them to church, they feel very uncomfortable here. They told me that. I one guy had a potluck, and I thought, oh, he'll love this. But he said, I feel very uncomfortable here. So I don't know, how, and even in my own interactions with them, they're very committed. A couple of them are very committed to their traditional beliefs, and so, I mean, they're willing to talk about God and Jesus and stuff, but they're committed to their traditional beliefs. So I don't know how to bridge the uncomfortableness and to break into their belief system. Yeah. So anyways, yeah, no, I guess the question is, one of the questions I had is how do you think First Nations people see the church now? Like there was all this, the stuff that went on in the past. If you were asked First Nations people now, what do you think of the church? What do you think they would say, or how do they feel about us now?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't realize you were answering a question. Yeah, I mean, just to go back to the uncomfortableness, have you been to a powwow? Uh-huh. Were you uncomfortable? Yeah. But you would rather them, would you see it more as truth, telling them, I got something for you. It's God, right? Come to my church service. But what if they were to say to you, I got something for you. It's God. Come to my powwow. Because actually there are Aboriginal people that are bringing the drum into Christian music, and how does that make you feel? Does it make you feel uncomfortable? Is it because you were told that it's evil? You know what I'm saying? But, I think, that mentality that we need to help these people somehow is a wrong way of thinking, and, even saying, well, we need to invite these people because they're native and need hope is a wrong way of thinking. We need to invite these people because we got so much love in our lives that we just want to share it with everybody, and that's my feeling when I come here to an event like this. I'm uncomfortable. I don't want to, where's my native, where's the other counterparts, right? Where's the other 6 native guys up here answering these questions, right? But I feel like, God has poured love into me and I want to pour it out on people. And if that means me coming and sitting in a white church after white church after white church, then that's good, But I think go to a powwow, go, those mothers, single mothers with little kids that are struggling. I could just imagine if you were to walk into one of those situations where a mother can't buy diapers and you, a white lady, goes there and says, here's a box of diapers for you. What's that gonna do? Because the divide with Native people, it's there. You're right, there is a divide. They probably think, they probably hate you, some of them, right? They probably hate. But if the person that they hate comes and shows love to them, it's like it breaks the wall, right? And and I mean, just to address that idea of like, we got to help them because they're Native or because they're poor or because, I think as a church is like the wrong mentality to have. I think, I think the right mentality being, if they come, just be like, when is your next powwow? Can we come? Like, imagine if the missionaries 150 years ago, instead of telling the Native people, what you're doing is evil, we'll show you the right way. What if they, instead of doing that, they just said, yeah, we're going to come to your powwow. Show us, teach us, let's integrate this, because our Christian faith is based in Jewish culture. There's, Jesus was an Israelite. God's coming back for the Jewish people. He's not coming back to Tisdale, Saskatchewan, right? And or the Alliance Church or any other church, and yeah, hopefully that answers some.
And also, just that they're lost and needing hope, and Jesus is the only hope. And if there's a barrier between them and Jesus because of something that happened what was no choice of their own, I think a huge responsibility is on the church to try break down that wall that is built up there from religious abuse of the people. The same with people who aren't Native people, right? If they need hope, we have the hope. We have the only hope in all the world, right? It's not like bring them into the church and they save them. It's like we have the hope living in us. Go out and be the hope, right?
I think that's the big, like, I think you just nailed it there, is like the hope. We do feel like we have the only hope, and I think that's the big disconnect. We don't want to learn about any other because we think we have it, and I think that's where we fail as like, because we need to take the interest in their life too, right? And what they, instead of just saying nope, not interested in, this is what I have, right? Like, I think that's where we fail as Christians, for any culture. Exactly. Yeah.
We can have different cultures and still have the hope of Jesus, or we can have different cultures and not have the hope of Jesus. We can have different religious titles and have the hope of Jesus or not have the hope of Jesus.
Yeah, and it's weird that for Native people, it's different. Like if you say to a Chinese person, you could be a Christian, but you can't have your culture. Or say to an African person, you could be African, but not have your. You could say to the Jewish people, you could be a Christian, and but for Native people, why is it different? Why do we gotta say, well, you can't have your culture and be a Christian too? Why is that? Because I think they would understand Christianity way better than anyone else, because and here's just a thought, it's Jesus has a spirit animal. It's the lamb. They would understand that, but yeah. You've been awfully quiet over there. No.
Many successful missionaries in the world became part of the culture, and therefore, where was it, like Papua New Guinea or someplace where they had the Peace Child, Anybody read the Peace Child book? Yeah, okay. And so they noticed that in the culture, and Jesus is the Peace Child, and so they took advantage of their culture. And it is also true that lots of different people feel uncomfortable going to church. And anybody that is different, because we all like everybody to be the same. We don't like anything out of the ordinary. And so if you're a little bit out of the ordinary in any way, coming into any group like a church where they always seem to, as you say, feel like it looks like a clique to everybody else. I mean, even when we went to church in Newfoundland, I felt they didn't know what to do with us. And, it was, well, really, literally, like we went in, they said hello, and we said we're from Saskatchewan, and they're like, I don't know. Like, it was like we came from another planet or something. I don't know. It was a little fishing village, and obviously no one from Saskatchewan just pops into their church. So, and that is kind of how I felt, even though they, said hello. I basically we said we were from Saskatchewan. So, anyway, so sorry we're late. I really thought this was 7:30. We thought we were early. But as usual, I obviously couldn't read, and I didn't look it up. I just thought I remembered from Sunday. So, yeah, it's good listening to the part that I listened. No, I had no question. It had to be the mic. So, since I... Yeah.
We only have the mic because there's people that want to watch it after.
Oh, okay. Oh, my goodness. You should have told me that before I was talking about it. Anyway, since I didn't hear anything before, like I won't know what has been asked before, so I don't want everybody repeating themselves.
I mean, I'm challenged by what you said about, have I been to a powwow? And I think the one thing that, if I'm honest, that scares me is I don't understand the spiritual side of things. And there's always, in my head, there's like, oh, if I go to this, what, is there going to be something spiritual that latches onto me? And I'll admit I don't understand the spiritual realm that well. But I think for me, like even, Jonathan and I went to the blanket ceremony, and which is very much like created for Caucasian people to experience Aboriginal history. But even like smudging, the guy who was hosting it said we're gonna smudge now, and I'm like, I don't know if this is okay. and so I'll admit, when there's that, I just like, okay, I'll just stay out of this, or I just don't go to those things.
Yeah, that's a tricky. I know. Yeah, I think. Yeah, and I think this is how I'll address your comment there. If you're not comfortable, don't do it. Don't, partake or whatever. And this, I'll just say this to you, like, and maybe you might understand this just with that conference we were at. The voice that's telling you to be afraid, what is that? And especially you, because you're a Christian, because you're a Christian, you have the Holy Spirit in you, and now you're taking the light into a potentially dark place, right? And you know, I think if you showed up at a powwow and you're the only visibly white person and people are looking at you, they're like, holy man, who is this guy? Let's go talk to him, you know. And you're like, hey, my name is Luke, I'm a pastor, you know, I'm just here to check it out, you know. And I guarantee you, you know, whoever is there is gonna be a nice person, and they're gonna be like, come have some Bannock tacos, man. You know, come get some Bannock, you know. They're not gonna be like, hey, let's go in the smudge right now. We gotta cast out the Holy Spirit out of you. You know, but the fear, and I think that's in a lot of churches that we go to and speak, is there's this fear. And a lot of times when I share, there's usually some big burly white farmer dude that comes up to me and says, you know what, Dwayne, I'm not afraid anymore. I understand you now. I understand your people. Could you forgive me? And I usually I give him a hug, and I'm like, yeah, man, you know, and, you know, just the voice that's telling you to be afraid, you know, isn't God, you know, and, you know, if I could just say that, yeah.
And I think, like, yeah, just the fear, like, thing, I think comes from what we've been taught, and our ancestors have been taught, that it's, like, evil. And there's definitely spiritual stuff and, like, evil spirit stuff that is, like, on Native people a lot with, especially with all, like, the abuse and everything too, brings that in, not just their connection, like, historical religion or spirituality or whatever. And, like, we have the most mighty spirit, right? We don't need to fear their religion, their ceremonies, their beliefs. We don't have to smudge, right? If they smudge you, that's them. That's not you doing it. If a bit of smoke gets on you, it's just smoke, right? We have fires, it's just physical stuff. And it's only spiritual because a human is doing spiritual stuff with it, right? And if you're not spiritually engaged in that, it can't come on to you unless you allow that to be. If you say, no, you have nothing to do with me, Jesus is the Lord of me, that can't overcome Jesus, right?
Yeah, and I think, you know, like, personally, I don't see anything wrong with, like, Native spirituality. Like, I don't see anything wrong with anything they're doing, you know. And you know what, yeah, like, what, you know, what spirit did they take kids out of their homes? You know, they were being taught the Bible. They were being taught Jesus. They were being taught God the Father. You know, what spirit was that, you know, done in? You know, you want to talk about evil spirit? You know, what evil spirit did that? In the name, they were using the name of Jesus. They were using the name of God. You know, that's a tough one, right? And you know, like I said, you know, what if from the pulpit you started saying, hey, you want to be a follower of Jesus? Let's drink some of his blood. Let's eat some of his flesh. The only man, it's someone that doesn't know Christianity would think this church is cannibals, right? You know what I'm saying? You know, and there's hard things Jesus told us to do too, right? And we don't understand, right? And but I think, yeah, I mean, I think experience the Native culture. You know, there is a lot of laughs at powwows. There's a lot of happiness. you know, but you as a white guy, you're automatically afraid, right? It's like, they don't like me. You know, but that's not true. It's just the lie you're believing, right? You know, there may be some that don't like you, but they probably like you less if you just stand there being afraid, right? But anyway, yeah. But yeah, I just want to have that on the record that I don't think there's anything wrong with native spirituality at all. But yeah. Any other questions?
That you feel like native spirituality is can partner with Christianity and it's not opposed.
Yeah, I just to add to that, I was wondering where like Jesus fits into the native spiritual, because that would be a difference, right? If there's not a connection there.
Yeah, like I think the clear one is you know, when you say you know, they could be one or whatever. I think that is true. I think it's more cultural though, right? I think, you know, when they say we believe in the creator, you know, for you as a white church person, the natural thing we've been told is like, no, that's the different creator, because your creator is different than my creator. So the tree you're looking at, an Aboriginal person, a white person, looking at the same tree, and he says, hey, the creator made that tree. And you're saying, no, it wasn't your creator, it was my creator. You know, but it's, you know, when they say creator, I believe that they're talking about God. You know, in the beginning, God created, you know, and I think, you know, what does God think about that? What does God think about the native people calling him the creator? I think he would be honored, you know. I don't know. You know, this is my imagination and my thinking, you know, and like I said before, like with, you know, when you call Jesus the Lamb of God, you know, that's his spirit animal. You know, God is a spirit, you know, and you know, could you bring the drum into your worship service? You know, would you feel totally uncomfortable? I think you would, you know. It would be a huge hurdle to get over. But for me, I think again, just personally, I'm okay with it. You know, if someone said, "Hey, we want to throw native regalia on you and make you go dance," I'd be like, "Let's do it." You know.
I think what he's thinking is if, like, giving different spirits authority, like the spirit of the willow or the spirit of the fire, or is that kind of like, what do you call native spirituality? I think probably natives even have like different ideas of what that means.
That you're saying that the culture of native spirituality is perfectly compatible with living a Christian life. No.
I'm saying, like, I mean,
The
would you say the Asian culture is compatible with living the Christian life, right?
mhm.
Like that thing in you, like if I said to you, hey, Asians, they believe in the dragon as giving them the power of their nation, you'd be okay with that. Would you? Or would you feel more strongly about the drum coming into a worship service? Right now, I got to make my stand, right? I mean,
Well, actually, I mean, I guess I don't understand all the impact of what the drum means, but to me, I mean, I've sat in, say, graduation ceremonies where the drum is included, right? And to me, I think if somebody brought the drum into a worship service, and I knew that they were somebody who knew Jesus, that their heart was that focus, I'd be fine with that person bringing the drum and worshiping God with the drum. But that's just me.
It's wrong? Do you think it's wrong? Like
To have the drum. See, I probably don't understand enough of what's all involved in the native beliefs, because I think that, I mean, certainly we've been taught that there's a whole piece of the spirit world that's included in First Nations beliefs that would be connecting to demon spirits, but I also know that there are people who, you know, as they believe in the Creator, that they compare that with a walk with God and a belief in Jesus. So
I'll just maybe answer that. Right. So if a white person says they believe in God, are you okay with that? And if he says, "Hey, my God is the same as your God," and that white person is an alcoholic or a meth addict, or he's like, "Yeah, man, I believe in God." And so if a native person says, "Hey, man, I believe in the same Creator as you," right? Would you believe both, or is it harder to believe? And why is that? That's my question to you. Like, why do you feel that? You know, is that by design that you were supposed to feel that? You know what I'm saying? Yeah. You know. Right. Right. Right.
but I also have come to believe that when people are on a journey towards God, that God is, as long as their heart is towards Him and their desires for a relationship
Right.
with God, that God is fine with
Right.
them having a mixed up set of beliefs.
Right.
Now, as
Right.
far as a theologian is concerned,
Right.
it's mixed up, but
Right.
as far as God's concerned, as long as
Right.
their heart is moving towards Him,
Mm-hmm.
that's okay that they're
Right.
pieces
Yeah.
of what they believe.
Right. Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. 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 Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a good question. I mean, if the pendulum swung the other way and the majority was native people, and you were coming at them saying, I believe in this God, and they had the church, they had the government, and they were saying, no, it's not the same God. Sorry, shut the door. I think, yeah, in my story, I think you'll kind of hear how I came to God, and how I felt God was speaking to me, and I'm an Aboriginal and God was speaking to me, is that okay? But here you go.
I sort of have three. I'm just going to hit you with all of them at once because I'm sure they're all interconnected. Okay. Though the first one is probably just because I'm late, because I don't understand the big deal about everyone talking about drums, because there's drums in services all over the world. Second one is Father Brebeuf, who was a Catholic priest that worked with the Huron people many, many, many years ago. 'Twas in the moon of winter time when all the birds had fled. The mighty Gitche Gumee sent angel choirs instead, and it's a song for Christmas. So the mighty Gitche Gumee, he is using as God, and as a Catholic priest, I assume it's the same God. And then the third one was, most cultures have a story about a boat and a flood, and Native Americans do too. And that's going to be the same God, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. No. Yeah, no, I'm just saying like the belief that we've been told to believe a certain thing. It was by design, right? That was the beginning conversation. Yeah, no, just you know, it.
The drum was made illegal.
Yeah, the drum was made illegal, and it was by the church, right? Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right. Yeah, yeah. Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah, I think right, right. Yeah, I mean going back a little bit, just my opinion, when the truth about residential schools came out and all the older Aboriginal people heard it that we're Catholic, they instead of saying we're going to denounce our faith, they kept their faith. They said God is real. God loves me. But what happened to me, that wasn't the God of the Bible. And and a lot of them will say if those people really believed what they were reading from the Bible, maybe what happened to us, it could have been way better. And I think, yeah, I think with the drum thing, it's just what are you comfortable with, maybe there isn't a big deal, but yeah, yeah. I know, for my church, if I said, hey, I do know a native musician who travels Canada and he brings the name of Jesus into his drum ceremony, because what you're doing up on stage is sort of like a ceremony, right? And I said, I want to invite him into our church. There would probably have to be 20 board meetings beforehand, and then a general congregation vote. But maybe by then I would be offended and leave, right? Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm just pointing out, maybe the elephant in the room, right? Yeah. Yeah, yeah. It's right. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah, why? A question I would ask myself too is like, why do we got to make a big deal out of everything? You know, and because the world is hurting, and as Christians, we need to do our part. And love people and right. Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. 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 Yeah, and when that lost person, when that lost Aboriginal person comes into the church, like if you just think about that statement today, that would be incredible, right? Because a native person knows that it was by the hands of the church that I have this brokenness, but I know I need God, so I'm going to go to church, and he's standing in your church, he's hurting, he's broken, you know. What is your response, to that guy, right? That's yeah. Anyway.
I think a person does know whether somebody is genuinely coming alongside of them or not. I think that's maybe where I grew up without a father. So believe me, it didn't take me long to figure out who was genuinely came alongside of me and who was just using words. And so I have a hunch that in order to make an impression on a First Nations person or Métis, whatever, use whatever term you want, you'd have to feel that that you genuinely are coming alongside of them, not to be just to be politically correct, because there's a lot of that going on right now. And so I think I know it seems to me that as an individual, I think you'd have to feel that the other person is genuinely coming alongside of you, not just to be nice or be politically correct. I don't know how you feel about that.
I would just agree. I think that that's probably the one thing that you've said that really stands out as probably the baseline answer is they'll know that we're Christians by our love, and when we get to that place that we can love unconditionally, that's when we'll start to be able to reach and just do that without any complex motives.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking is just when I asked the question, what brought you here and stuff, like that's where you need to work out of, is that place in your heart, that care, and just that it's not going to be easy, it's not going to be comfortable. Our church has felt that with Dwayne through the years. It hasn't been easy for them to love him through the years. You could ask the pastor there. And yeah, but it's God's heart for us to love people in their brokenness, and He can help you through challenges of that, but it's not going to be easy or comfortable.
All right. Any other questions?
I don't know. Have you talked about prayer? Because really a biggie is pray for each other. Like, are we praying for Aboriginal people or Indigenous people or whatever? Or as you say, actually just for people in Central America or someplace? And do Aboriginal Christians pray for us?
I don't know. Are you praying? Right. Yeah. Do you pray for your?
Someone in Brazil who is praying for the Inuit.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And I can't speak for all Aboriginal people, but I know when I go travel to different churches, and I'm always praying for people, praying for the grannies that want their grandson to come back to God, praying for the mothers that have, their daughters wanting to commit suicide. I mean, I open myself up and I'm always praying for Caucasian people, right? And it's not because they're Caucasian or just because they're broken, right? And they're people and yeah. Maybe you do. I mean, do you? Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right. Or in 7-Eleven or in A&W or in KFC. No, okay. Do you have a question, sir? No. You have the right to remain silent, and you're choosing to exercise that right? But yeah. All right. You want to have the final say there? You're the chair of the board there, so this is your church congregation going to be watching you. So now you better address.
I think we could just close in prayer and Lord, we just thank you for Dwayne and Lovejoy and their willingness to come and just be open and honest with us. And thank you for the honest questions and discussion around this table. And we just ask for your blessing on it. We ask that you would guard your truths that you have laid on our hearts as we've spoken, and that you would continue to change us to prepare us to love unconditionally and not even to feel like we're identifying one group different from another, but just to love and to reach out where we see the needs that you bring before us. And so we need you, and we know that it's all what Jesus does that can change our hearts and can change our community. And so we know there are lots of First Nations people around us, and as a church we don't have a lot of contacts, but we do have a lot of individuals, and individuals have contacts. So Lord, we just pray that you would open doors where you want them opened, and that you would also, as Dwayne has challenged us, cause us to be open to entering into the First Nations culture and learning about them in ways that would help us to be able to pray better. And so we leave this at your feet and submit ourselves to you for how we do ministry, how we obey you in this area, in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry I missed the first half. Performance has been interesting and all kind of stuff for the bit we got to.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't go on my memory, obviously. You can look at the church board.
It's recorded, so you could look back and. But yeah, I'll pray too, dear Lord. I just thank you for who you are, God, and what you did on the cross, how you sent your son, Jesus. And God, I just thank you for the Tisdale Alliance Church, Lord, just their openness to just walk in the direction of healing, Lord, and understanding, Lord. And I just bless them, Lord, as an Aboriginal person, for whatever that's worth, Lord. I just bless this church. I bless these people, God, and I just love them, Lord, and I just know you love them, God. And I just pray for open doors, Lord, that the church door here would just be open to the hurting people, Lord. And I just pray for revival in Tisdale, God. I just hear that word, Lord, revival. And I just pray that would happen here, God. And we just give this time to you and give tomorrow to you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Sorry, I misspoke. I thought we were done.